Hey guys, Rob from Expedition Team Overland. Today we're doing an install of the Midland Micromobile MXT-275 15-watt FRS GMRS communications radio. What we have is the 6 dB antenna and 6 meters of antenna cable. All this came from Midland. The only other thing we have to install is the antenna bracket, which we got off Amazon. It's a stainless steel bracket that goes to the fender for the Jeep Wrangler. All this is going to be powered directly to the battery. It is fused from the factory wiring harness, the Midland factory wiring harness, so no additional fuses are going to be used for this install. Now we are using rivets instead of bolts and screws to mount this to the Jeep. Dee is going to be mounting this under the glove box. So we just had to drill out each of the holes here just a little bit bigger to fit the rivet. Now the two side holes were a little bit, the drill was walking around a little bit, so we decided to use my another drill to get a nice clean drill. This takes nice slow, and you see the drill will stop when it gets a little bit of tension, so we just back it off and put it in. For the second hole, we added a little bit of cutting oil that just gave it a little bit more, cleaned up the friction a little bit, got the dust particles down a little bit, made it a little bit of an easier thing. We should have used it for this one as well. Now here we are drilling underneath the glove box in the plastic trim. So what we did was first we put the bracket up on there, took a Sharpie pen, and put 3 dots of where the holes are going to go for where we want to drill the rivets out. Very simple process. Check twice, drill once. As you can see, the 3 holes are right there, and then that's where the 3 rivets are going to go into. So that's how it's going to look. Just double checking all the filaments, make sure it looks good. We're in the right spots. Now the bracket comes off very easy. There's 2 little tabs on either side, and you pull it off. So there's the rivet, goes in there. It's a pop rivet. You have to have a rivet gun for it. It's a very simple thing. You can find them at your local hardware store. We chose the center hole because you have a little bit more movement in the you can move it back and forth a little bit more. You put the rivet gun on, and then you squeeze it. And when you open it up again, you have to push up a little bit more so it can get a little bit more on the rivet, and all you're doing is you're squeezing the plastic rivet onto itself. It's a very nice way of doing stuff. It's clean. It's especially great if you can't get to the back side of it. We did have access to the back side of the plastic trim here, but to get a bolt. But we just felt this was just a little bit easier process, and with 3 of them, it has a real big footprint and makes it a little bit more secure. Same thing here, you put the gun on and then you squeeze it, and when you open it up, you push it back up so it walks out a little bit. That's how it's grabbing the rivet and pulling it out. There's a little bit of you saw in the other video, there's a little bit of the end of the rivet that pops out. Just make sure you get that popped out so you can get the next rivet on for your next job. Nice and secure. Now we're putting the radio on. There's those 2 channels on either side. That's where the bracket slides into. You don't have to open the teeth. It just slides on, and it'll click as soon as it gets in there, and it's now nice and secure. Now you have an extra USB outlet here. You could use that to charge your phone or charge other stuff. Now to get to the electrical, we're taking the glove box off. So you just open the glove box, and then the 2 sides up by the where it meets, you're just going to push them in. There's those 2 pins. They just pull out, and you pull it straight out. That's how you remove the glove box. So now we're going to, on the driver and passenger side, there's a trim piece here. You get a trim removal tool, and you just very slowly pry these out, and then you have access to a hole in the firewall with where the foam is right there. And that's how you can get wires and cable through the firewall. You got to get in there with a screwdriver to break the foam a little bit. And on the other side of the firewall, there's a bunch of where the fenders all come together. You need to kind of drill that out. Now we're inside the glove box where we're going to run the wiring, both the cable and the electrical, is up underneath the glove box, up around the cabin air filter. There's a little channel above with foam. We're going to use some zip ties and plastic zip tie adhesive to keep it all clean and secure so it doesn't rattle around. Come around the speaker, above the speaker, you can see the light right above there, and that's where we ran the wire. The fuses, we made them nice and accessible, so if we were to blow a fuse, we have the ability to change it out real quickly. Just have to remove the trim panel. So now we're going to have to extend the wire because it doesn't, the factory wiring harness from Midland is just not long enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a set of heat shrink crimp to connect the wires. There's multiple ways that you can use this. It's all personal preference, but this is the easiest way that we thought. You can actually solder it and then put a piece of heat shrink over it, but this kind of does the same thing in one. Sorry, it's a little out of focus, but with these, you almost feel like you're going to be melting the wire, but you're not. You got to get a nice, good hot heat gun on it, and it works. So now once all that's complete, we got to run the wiring through the firewall. So what I use is a coat hanger and a bunch of electrical tape. What you're going to want to do is you want to get it on the electrical tape and then make a cone type at the end so it can go through very smoothly. You don't want to put in a lot of tape on there, and you don't want to put too little tape on there. It's a happy medium. So once we push it through, we're going to push the coat hanger through the fender, through the firewall, into the fender, and you can see it coming here, and you're going to pull nice and slow. If you feel any tension, stop and go back. You'll see later on when we ran the other wiring, we lost it came off the coat hanger. So here there's a hole in the fender. Not sure why Jeep put that there for, but it's a great place to zip tie your wiring to. We put it in wire loom, just personal preference. And then it'll be coming around that fender, and we'll attach it to the some factory wiring harness. Here we're putting connectors on the positive and the negative side because we're going straight to the battery. You get these at AutoZone or your local auto parts store. They're it's a crimp device, so you just put it on the end and you crimp it down. Give it a little bit of a tug to make sure it's nice and secure. That one's done. Now we're going to go do the negative side. Same thing. Strip the wire back a little bit, put it on, and you crimp. You have to put a lot of force to crimp that down. You want to make it as secure as you can. If you want, you can put a little bit of solder on there to make it a little bit better of a connection, but it's not necessary, personal preference. So now here we're at the battery terminals. The negative has one extra terminal. The positive has 3 extra terminals. You don't have to run all your electrical to the battery for the negative. You can ground it anywhere on the Jeep as long as it's properly grounded. We decided to run it to the battery, just personal preference. Those are 10mm sockets that you just pop those off and put that round connection on there and then retighten the bolt. So we got it all tied up to connect to the battery. We plugged the microphone into the telephone jack, power buttons on the top center, and it powers on. One thing you want to do is, because we do not have the antenna mounted yet, we do not want to transmit. You can short out the radio with transmitting without an antenna or a properly grounded antenna. So we just want to make sure the electrical was working. We're going to turn it back off and now run the cable for the antenna. So the fender bolt just comes straight off. We used a impact gun here. This is an Amazon link, Amazon bracket. Link will be in the description. And it's pretty easy to install that. Now, one great feature that Midland has is that they make the connection, the connector for the antenna mount comes off to be able to run it through the firewall. So you just hold the end of it with your fingers and unscrew it. This is a very, very great feature Midland has. Before, you'd have to cut the cable and then re-put on a new end. But these removable ends is a great feature that Midland has, and has made life a lot easier, because you don't have to buy any of those connections and know how to put those ends on. It's a little bit of a specialty to put those on. I've had to go to a couple shops to have them do it in the past with CB radios. So here we are doing the same thing, but now we're going the opposite direction because we're running the cable from the firewall into the cabin of the vehicle. This one took a lot of finesse. The hole was pretty small. It took us 3 or 4 tries. You'll actually see later in this video that the cable came off. Same thing we did with the electrical. You're just going to connect the wire to the coat hanger. We run a couple threads, a couple wraps of electrical tape on the wire first to give it a little bit of strength, and then you just get it nice and tight. Like I said, this is that hole is pretty small, and that's even with the connector off, it's still a wide cable, very large gauge cable. So it took us 2 or 3 tries. We didn't get it all on video, but you'll see why. Because as soon as we started pulling it through, we got a little bit of tension. We kept trying to move the cable around. We have some lights. It's a real hard angle to get into. I'm not even pulling that hard, you'll see. And the cable will just come straight off that with the electrical tape. Heat was probably a factor. It was about 90 degrees inside the garage that day. It's been a hot summer here so far. And but it just takes time. Up, you see, you lost all the tension and it fell off. So we finally got the cable through. Now this is the other end of the antenna cable. So it just unscrews. It's a 2-part antenna cable. There's a plastic bushing for traveling to eat up some space. So you put it in from the bottom, and then you're going to take the top piece that you just unscrewed and screw it back on. There's not a lot of you don't want to torque these down too much. You don't want to break the threads or anything like that. Just nice and snug. You'll see that there is 2 flat pieces on the antenna mount, and that's where you're going to use a crescent wrench to tighten it down. You don't try to use something without teeth, because that will just that could possibly mess up the threads a little bit. So I just used a crescent wrench and torqued it down. Nice and tight, not too tight, just finger tight. You can see I did it with one hand. Ran the cable back up, gave it a little bit of slack under between where it's going to come down. That's just personal preference. We're using dielectric grease from Permatex. Just cleans up your connections, gives it so water doesn't get in there. Just going to unscrew it, put a little bit of dab on this part of the antenna, just where all the connection is. And I'm going to do the same thing to the inside of the antenna where this is going to mount. This is not 100% necessary, just personal preference. Just makes it a nice, keeps some moisture out. Now just screw on the antenna. It takes a little bit to thread on. Be very careful you're not cross-threading the antenna. That's not good, because you'll have to redo it all. Like I said, I left a little bit of extra space to get under the hood, and we zip tied it to that wiring that we ran for the electrical and to that bolt. So here we are cleaning up. We're almost done. We put those cable ties onto there just to keep it a little bit secure, right where the fuses are, and keeps it all nice and clean. You see, we just ran the extra 6 meters of cable, so there's a lot of extra cable, and we just zip tied it up above the air box there. Plugged it in. We have a USB cover for it to keep some of the dust off, and it works. This has been a very nice, easy install. With filming and everything, it took us a little over an hour and a half to 2 hours. We lost a little bit of time with doing getting the antenna cable through the firewall. Nice, great, easy, clean, fun install for some great communication radios that we're going to have on the trail. Thanks a lot. Have a great one.